Mr. Chairman. I've had a few minutes to look over the document that was given to us by Administrator Pruitt, and I don't see anything in here, just for the record, because I want to make sure that Mr. Art Elkins from the AG's, the IG's office, his name doesn't appear on this. This appears to be a log. It talks about Mitch McCollum and others. So I know it's in the record, but this is not a satisfactory answer to me, what you handed me. I just wanted you to know that, sir. I want to go back to the science question I had, because one of my colleagues said, well, he wanted to get back to the budget. So my question on the science was that what you're working on is you're proposing dismantling ways in which scientific health data was gathered before and making it more public. We had this discussion. There's a bill that was introduced by one of our colleagues in the Science Committee, Mr. Smith, and so it's been scored. So this is a budget question. What the EPA would be doing would be spending $250 million annually over the next few years to ensure transparency, which does not seem to be a problem in putting things together in medical journals to have medical scientific evidence that has been used in tobacco cases, other cases, and what we need to do to protect the public health from harms that are being made by certain substances. So I just wanted my folks on the other side of the aisle to know my question did have a $250 million attachment to it of money, in my opinion, that would be wasted. Mr. Pruitt, staff has been under attack during your tenure. You publicly blamed your staff instead of taking responsibility for your wasteful spending. And I heard what you said. I take full responsibility. But yeah, when someone asks a question, it's always, well, you know, someone signed this, or someone did that, or someone did this, and I was under the impression. You know, it seems to be a pattern. You're supporting a budget that nearly slashes 4,000 employees. You've imposed hiring freeze and staff buyouts, and I'm glad to hear you're going to lift the freeze and or a portion of the freeze. We'll see how big it is in Region 5. My colleagues on the Energy and Commerce Committee spent much of the morning chronicling your numerous ethical transgressions, including reports that you reassigned several employees in retaliation for voicing their concerns about spending and management of the agency. In fact, some of them are gone. So I would just like to hear from you, because this is out in the public. I have to say that when you don't have the confidence of the public and the people that you directly have to report to, and I've lost all confidence in the way that you handled some of the questions and the way that you said you took responsibility and then, in fact, deflected the responsibility. How do you think these ethics scandals are affecting employee morale? How are you going to overcome your reputation so staff do not fear retaliation? Because there's documented retaliation as far as I'm concerned. How do you expect the scientific or the technical recommendations from independent, peer-reviewed scientists that have been used for decades by Republicans and Democrats across the board, both presidents and people in Congress? When somebody speaks out against your agenda, they appear to be retaliated against, removed from a board, or just deflected. So what are you going to do to regain not only the trust of your staff, but you've lost my trust?
I would say to you unequivocally, I know of no instance, I'm not aware of any instance that any employment action has been taken against someone for any advice or counsel they've given with respect to spending. I'm not aware of any instance of that.
Is Mr. Shemilisky still in your employment?
I'm not aware of any instance in that regard.
Is Mr. Shemilisky still working for the EPA?
It's not. It's my understanding he is not. He resigned, I think, late last year.
He resigned. And he resigned because he actually kind of publicly has gone on the record with Mr. Jackson and Mr. Reed and Mr. Allen a couple of times pointing out to you directly about your spending. They had questions about things going on in the office and desks and hardening of cars and other things like that. They looked at your travel plans, and a couple of times their pushback prevailed. And then Mr. Shimoleski, who had been very vocal about it, because I find this kind of a curious thread, all of a sudden found himself the target. He found himself the target after he came back from a trip from Asia with Mr. Pence. He was asked to resign, turn in his credentials. Mr. Pruitt's aides informed the White House that they were dissatisfied with Mr. Shimoleski's unresponsiveness during his travel plans, including a time when he could not be reached in Hawaii when he was preparing for a visit by Mr. Pence. There were anonymous complaints filed with the EPA inspectors generals that alleged Mr. Shimoleski could not get the appropriate level of security clearance for his duties because of various indiscretions. After an investigation, the Inspector General dismissed all allegations in the complaint and found it unfounded. And it appears that Mr. Perona, who I mentioned earlier, who's under an ethics investigation, was the person out to discredit him. Does Mr. Shimoleski, is he deserving of an apology? How do you tell other employees that if they speak up, they speak out, that the same thing won't happen to them?
I can only say to you what I said earlier, which is I'm not aware of any instance that actions have been taken from employment status with respect to those issues. I do want to address the science issue because, again, I think that to characterize this as somehow being selective in the kind of science that's going to be used at the agency is just simply not reflective of the decision we've made. This is a proposal that affects all science, irrespective of the source. I think this committee, some members of this committee would probably be upset if the API issued some sort of findings with respect to methane, but didn't provide methodology and data to the agency to support rulemaking, and we didn't publish that as part of our decision making.
Mr. Chair, I'm reclaiming my time. I've been through this with the tobacco industry. I've been through this with Monsanto and other things in the ag industry. I think I have a good handle on what's going on. And you had an opportunity today to come here and say you were going to support peer-reviewed science that's been used for decades. You had an opportunity to say you were taking full responsibility for any ethical lapses that you had. And you had an opportunity to explain why everything, the ozone and the methane rule that you took to court, it was sloppy work. The court rejected it. And you didn't, you kind of not answered that directly. So I just really feel, and I've held back on doing this as some of my other colleagues have, but I think I'm going to say it clearly and straight to you because I think you deserve that. But Mr. Pruitt, I think it's time that you resign.
Thank you.